What weights do you choose when you're working out, and how do you decide what weights you choose? Today we're going to Today we're going to go over something super important that a lot of lifters struggle with, and that's how to select the right weight for your workouts. I'm going to break down the three primary methods used for selecting weights: percentage of 1 rep max, rate of perceived exertion, RPE, and reps in reserve, RIR. By the end of this video, my goal is that you'll understand each method and hopefully know exactly when and how to use them effectively. Now let's start with the most traditional approach, and this is the percentage of 1 rep max, or 1 RM percentage sign as you'll see in some programs. This is exactly what it sounds like. Let's say I've tested my bench press and my max is 225 pounds. If my program calls for sets at 75% of my 1 rep max, then that would be 169 pounds for my working sets. The great thing about percentage-based training is that it's objective and it's easily trackable. You can specifically see how you're progressing over time, and it works especially well in periodized programs where you're systematically manipulating the intensity of the weight. But percentage-based training has some real limitations. For one, your 1 rep max isn't constant. It fluctuates based on sleep, nutrition, stress, and countless other factors. If I didn't sleep well last night or I'm coming back from a vacation, that 75% might feel a lot heavier than it should. Plus, testing your 1 rep max regularly isn't always practical. I mean, when was the last time you maxed out on lateral raises or cable flies? For a lot of us, it's not going to happen, and we're not going to take the time to do that. That brings us to our second method, ratings of perceived exertion, or RPE. RPE is subjective. It's how hard an exercise feels on a scale of 1 to 10. If I'm doing a set of squats and I rated an RPE 8, that means it's really hard, but not maximal. 10 is maximal effort. The beauty of RPE is that it accounts for how you're feeling on any given day. If I plan to squat 315 pounds based on percentages, but I'm feeling beaten down today, I might adjust and use a weight that feels like an RPE 8 instead, which might be 285 pounds today. RPE is great because it automatically adjusts to your daily readiness. It doesn't require 1 rep max testing. It works for any exercise, and it accounts for fatigue during your session. But traditional RPE has its own problems. The biggest issue is accuracy, especially as you get closer to your max. Research shows that lifters often report submaximal RPE values even when they've reached complete failure. You might think you're at an RPE 8, but if you couldn't actually do any more reps, you're closer to that RPE 10. And this is where our third method comes in, which is repetitions in reserve, or RIR. RIR is simply how many more reps you think you could do before reaching failure. If I'm doing a set of 8 reps on bench press and I feel like I could do 2 more reps before failing, that's 2 reps in reserve. So what does RIR look like? Well, first I'm going to show you what 2 RIR looks like, 2 reps in reserve, and then I'll show you what 0 reps in reserve looks like for that next set. All right, so this is going to be 2 reps in reserve. I'm shooting for 6. But obviously we're going for 2 reps in reserve, not necessarily a rep range. But I chose this weight with the idea in mind that I should be able to get 6 reps here with the ability to complete 2 more if I was going to failure. I would say that was pretty much exactly at 2 reps in reserve. I could have maybe gotten 3 more, but I'd say 2. Yeah, so that was 2 RIR. All right, so this is going to be RIR 0 or RIR. No, I'm going to failure on this. So I'm going to failure on this. It's not going to really affect my training. I've been able to get 6 reps on all of these comfortably, feeling like I could get 2 in the tank. So next week, I'm going to increase my weight. So just for funsies, I'm going to take this to failure to show you what that kind of looks like. I got my safety racks up. It's going to hit the safety rack. It's going to roll back to my neck. I'm going to turn my head and slip on out. And that way I can go to failure with a heavy weight be protected, and you can be like, oh wow, that's kind of more what failure or zero RIR looks like. Obviously, zero RIR would mean racking the weight and not going to failure. I'm going to failure on this because I want to see what it actually is for this weight. So here you go. And hopefully it's not just 6 reps. So I'd say I was pretty accurate. Didn't go to failure because I wasn't even going to be able to lift off for a 9th rep. So perfect. 6 was my 2 RIR. There was not another rep there. So I'm happy with that. Got 8 reps on my last set. Next week, we'll go up from 233 to 235. I'll continue that. I'll do 6 reps at that, and not really care about my RIR. My RIR that I will want to get is up to that 2. Once I feel like I can, at a spot where it is 2 RIR, I'll complete my 3 sets, and then on that 4th set, I'll go for a max reps. And then if I get 8, like I just did then I'll increase my weight. All right, so that is what reps in reserve looks like for 2 reps in reserve and 0 reps in reserve. What makes reps in reserves or RIR so valuable is that it's more precise than traditional RPE near your limits. It gives you a concrete number to work with. Now, here's something that's really useful and that researchers have actually combined RPE and RIR into a single scale. On this scale, RPE 10 equals 0 RIR, absolute failure as we saw. RPE 9 equals 1 rep in reserve. RPE 8 equals 2 reps left. RPE 7 is equal to 3 RIR. RPE 5 and 6 equals about 4 to 6 RIR, and so on and so forth. This RIR-based RPE scale gives us the best of both worlds. The specificity of RIR with the familiarity of RPE. Now, there are some important nuances with RIR that you need to understand. First, experience matters tremendously. Research shows experienced lifters are much better at estimating RIR than beginners. I've been training for 2 decades. This doesn't seem possible, but time is a weird thing. That being said, I'm still refining my ability to gauge RIR on certain exercises. If you're newer to lifting, you should absolutely practice using RIR, but don't rely on it exclusively yet. Here's a great way to practice. After you do a set, note how many more reps you think you could do. Then actually perform those extra reps on one of your next sets to see if you were right. This builds your internal gauge over time. Another key point is that RIR accuracy varies by exercise type. Compound movements like squats and deadlifts generally are easier to gauge for reps in reserve, whereas Olympic lifts are much harder to estimate accurately, and then your machine exercises are often easier than free weights. Your isolation movements, it's really going to depend on the muscle group and your experience level. Now let me give you some practical recommendations for different training goals. When it comes to growing muscle, hypertrophy training, aim for about 6 to 12 reps at that 0 to 2 RIR for most work. Keep compound movements at that 2 to 4 reps in reserve most of the time, and then you can occasionally take isolation exercises to failure. For strength training, it's recommended that the work primarily is in that 1 to 6 rep range, and with that main strength work at 1 to 3 reps in reserve, and then only occasionally going to true failure, usually during testing phase. For muscular endurance, we're going to be looking at higher reps, so 12 plus reps, closer to that 0 to 1 RIR, and training closer to failure is actually beneficial here for endurance with shorter rest periods for that endurance training. Now, when it comes to power development, I generally say never train power movements to failure, but maybe there are some caveats out there that exist, but generally you want to maintain that velocity so you're not going for failure. So I shoot for an RPE around 4, and then for heavy power work, 2 to 3 reps in reserve at minimum. The most common mistakes that I see with reps in reserves are overestimating how many reps you have left, especially as a beginner. This leads consistently training too light. The other is always training too close to failure. Some people hear about reps in reserve and think I need to be at 0 to 1 every set, and that's just a recipe for burnout, and most likely you aren't going to be able to maintain that level of volume over time. And then applying RIR inconsistently across exercises. You might be honest about your RIR on squats because they're hard, but overestimate on bicep curls because you enjoy doing bicep curls. So the other one is not recognizing that RIR accuracy changes with rep ranges. It's generally easier to gauge reps in reserve in that moderate rep range, 6 to 15, than very low or very high. So what's the bottom line? The most effective approach for most lifters is to use a combination of these methods based on your experience level, your specific goals, the exercises you're performing, and where you are in your training cycle. As a beginner, I'd suggest relying more on percentage-based training while practicing your RIR estimation. As an intermediate, start incorporating your reps in reserves for more of your main lifts while using percentages as a guide. And then as an advanced lifter, you might use RIR as your primary intensity regulation for choosing your weights and your reps, occasionally checking in with percentage-based work to see how you're progressing. Remember, accurately gauging RIR is a skill that takes practice. Start conservatively, track your results, and refine your perceptions over time. Your ability to precisely gauge reps in reserve will improve with experience, making it an increasingly valuable tool for your training. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions about these methods, drop them in the comments below, and if you found this helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe for more evidence-informed training content.